Hello and welcome to a special edition of Frost Over the World on a weekend when the future King of England tied the knot with his Queen-to-be. It's estimated that around 2 billion people around the world watch the royal wedding of Prince William and Kate Middleton, or Princess Catherine, as she is known. That's 1 in 3 of the world's population, 1 in 3. What does that say about the popularity of the British royal family, or more particularly this newlywed couple? With me is William Shawcross, who of course wrote the official biography of the late Queen Mother, and Eve Pollard, former editor of several of Britain's greatest newspapers. Is this, Eve, an event about a traditional royal couple or a quite different young royal couple, or is it both? It's both.
I think that the royal family are fascinating to people around the world because it's the perfect constitutional monarchy. You know, they rule, but they're not in charge. Not only do they do this, but they do it with the best flummery, the best pomp, and the best circumstance in the world. So people are fascinated by our royals, and then they're fascinated by the love story of any young couple, but particularly this young couple, probably because of the prince's late mother, Diana, who was a world figure, the first world superstar, as it were, that the royal family had found in that celebrity way.
Right. Do you feel that way? Well, actually, here's an interesting point. With your book, we were just talking about your book about the Queen Mother. From that book, from the things that the Queen Mother told other people, they gave her advice, and so on and so forth, what would be the Queen Mother's, since you see her mind better than anybody, the late Queen Mother's advice to this young queen to be?
I think she would say many of the things that Eve has already said. This is an extraordinary occasion for the country, and it just shows how remarkably, the remarkable affection that the monarchy is held in, not only here, but also abroad. And it is astonishing. I mean, this is a relatively small and powerless country now, but 2 billion people looking at this wedding throughout the world. I mean, we are at the centre of the world on this occasion. And it's remarkable that this institution, with all its longevity, and has survived and adapted itself so well to the modern world. And as for the Queen Mother's advice, I'm sure she would just say, here's to you. And but she would also say about Catherine, you've been very, very clever. You've never given an interview. Keep it that way. Never talk to the press.
Because the Queen Mother, the late Queen Mother, gave one interview that put her off for life.
Well, I think the day after she got engaged in 1923, a Scottish reporter came and knocked on her parents' door in Mayfair and said, can I talk to you? And as it was a Scottish reporter and they came from Scotland, her father let him in, and she gave a perfectly innocuous conversation with him, and the palace wasn't at all happy. So that was the last time, as you say, that she ever did it.
Yes,
and she's quite right. I mean,
in the remaining 76 years or whatever of her life, she never did it again.
No, and the Queen has never given an interview, and she's absolutely right. And Catherine should do the same.
And she has been very
Why
clever.
am I sitting here nodding about people not doing interviews? That's not my vested interest, but anyway.
But I mean, Catherine has been very, very, very clever, that she has never spoken to the press. And when they had their little separation, she never spoke to the press. And we were fascinated to hear her speak for the first time at that engagement interview, which she was very, very careful about. And she's given a great impression of herself as someone who's very capable, confident that she can do this enormous job.
And why do you think the rest of the world is so interested in the royal family? Is it because it's a throwback to an era that they loved, or whatever? What is it?
I think it's a mixture. I think people do love, you know, the horse guards and the plumes and the carriages. It's a fairy story. It's Disney, but the real thing. It is all part of our history, of course, but it is, you know, the handsome prince, the beautiful princess. But I also think people think how clever this country has been in the way that we have persuaded our kings in various ways over the many, many years to, as I say, to rule but not be in charge. We have a brilliant democracy. They stand above it. You know, other countries who elect their president, who are usually ex-politicians, can only look at the longevity of the Windsor household. It's had its ups and downs and think this will go on forever. if they keep doing the same thing as they've done for the last 50 years.
And people have said that the press have given them, particularly in their initial relationship up at St Andrews at the university, given them great privacy, really, premarital privacy. But that's not going to remain the same, is it?
The more privacy they can have, the better. Obviously, for everybody, that's true, and it's certainly true for this couple. And yes, the press did exercise some restraint in their period when they were together at university. It's an unfortunate fact of life, the paparazzi, etc., etc. But they're going to live in North Wales now, where he is continuing for the next 18 months at least his Air Force career, and I think that's pretty remote, and they will be fairly private up there. But then they will have to take more and more public responsibilities as he gets older, and more and more will fall upon both of them. And so we will see them more and more.
Yes, and it's amazing that in terms of what they're going to have to face up to. I mean, you've advised her not to do any more interviews, but I mean, she is going to be more and more the focus of attention.
Yes.
And it's not going to be quite as privacy packed.
No, it won't be.
And also, I think that they've learnt from the lessons before, so that number one, she'll, with a bit of luck, have a year or two or maybe more where she's not doing. I mean, Prince Charles and Princess Diana immediately threw themselves into doing work, and she was only 20. Kate's nearly 10 years older. She's had more experience, and I think that you will see them perhaps 3 or 4 times more this year. They're going to Canada. They're doing a couple of other things. They'll be kept back so that she has time to watch and learn. And I don't think she'll do so much on her own as Princess Diana did for many years.
I mean, the wonderful thing of the whole institution is what Eve said about its role. And there's a British philosopher, Roger Scruton, who described the monarchy as the light above politics, which I think is a wonderful phrase for showing its value. And it creates, one of the Queen's private secretaries once said, there's no point in having a monarchy unless it makes people feel a little happier. And it does. It's a romantic institution. It has legend, it has myth, it has romance, it has affection. And that's, I think, what we've seen this weekend, the extraordinary affection in which it is still held. And that's, in large part, a great tribute to the Queen, who has been almost 60 years on the throne and seen this country through immense turbulence and social change. And she and the monarchy has been the centre which always holds.
Yeah, and she's been there at the centre of it all. And what about children will obviously arrive? There's a rumour abroad that if they have a girl, they're going to call her Eve, and if they have a boy, they're going to call him William.
Unlikely, that one.
Yes.
Eve is quite
both
possible.
very unlikely. Well, we'd like an Olympic baby, wouldn't we? We'd like a baby for 2012. Would be
an Olympic baby.
An Olympic baby.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
Not to take part, you understand. Just be born in the year would be very, very nice, wouldn't it?
Perfect. Well, it's an exciting moment. Thank you both for being with us this weekend, and onward and upward. Thank you. He was the first amateur jockey in 30 years to beat the professionals in the Cheltenham Gold Cup, one of the most prestigious horse races in the UK. Earlier this month, he was tipped to become the first amateur to add a Grand National to his Gold Cup in the same season. But in the event, he came in second with his horse, Oscar Time. But as well as being a jockey, Sam Waley-Cohen is a businessman who runs a chain of dental practices around the country. That was an interesting choice. We'll come back to that in a minute. And he's also known in the media as the matchmaker who helped to get Prince William and Kate Middleton together again after their brief split in 2007. So, what's it like to be a businessman, amateur jockey, royal matchmaker, and God knows what else? Sam joins me now.
Hi there.
Welcome. What a long list of things there. It was thrilling, the Grand National this year. Another, like Al Jazeera, goes all the way around the world, the Grand National. You were very close, weren't you? I mean, not just second, but very close. It looked as though you were going to make it.
Desperately close. And even in my own mind, I thought I was going to get there. I mean, before an event like that, you work out the tactics and what would happen in the perfect environment if it really panned out. And you don't really expect it to work quite like that for you, especially in a race like the Grand National, because there are so many horses and so many challenges beyond the fences. But the tactics sort of came really to the fore, and the idea was to come with a sort of long, sustained, late charge. And for a moment, the sort of world opened up as we thought we'd get there. And really, even for that second, you sort of articulate in your own mind, yes, we're going to get there. And then this frustration as you can't couldn't get past Ballard-Briggs.
Was there anything you could have done that could have changed it, or was it written in the stars the way it happened?
In a funny way, I mean, you go home after a race like that, and you know everyone goes, "Wonderful, wonderful! You came second." In your own mind, you're devastated if you like that you've come so close to winning and come second. And you look at the tapes and you analyse and analyse and analyse. And I think the reality is that on the day there was probably nothing in the whole race over the whole 4 miles 4 that could have actually changed the makeup of the race and changed the results. So in a sense, although you have the frustration of coming second, you have the solace of thinking actually there was no sort of hard luck story or no real sense of error that could have been adjusted.
So are you now, Sam, are you tempted to become a professional jockey as opposed to an amateur jockey? You're very unique to be an amateur jockey, but are you tempted to be a professional one?
No. And for a very simple reason, is because I like doing it just for the sake of doing it. It's a sort of very simple and very, for me anyway, very pure approach to it, and it escapes some of the commercial realities of life. For me, it's about getting on, having fun and riding a racehorse and trying to win the race, and that is an end in itself. It's not about the money or what more it could lead on to. It's just purely, I'm going to go out there and do my best and try and win this race.
Yeah, and what is the sort of absolute technical difference between being a professional jockey, obviously an amateur jockey, both sit on a horse, etc., etc. What's the difference? What's the dividing line?
Really, it's a technicality. So in theory, I could go professional tomorrow and say, if you would like me to ride your horse, then you have to pay me and I take a percentage of the prize money and all the rest of it. As an amateur, actually, that percentage of prize money goes back into horse racing and helps fund the sort of administration and support of the whole network. So it's really a technicality.
Just a technicality.
Yeah.
And then how did you get into the dental business? That's an unusual choice. Did you wake up when you were 5 years old and say, one day I want to be a dentist? No.
No, and in fact, I'm not a dentist.
No.
I really run it from a management perspective. So my role is as chief executive, and what we're doing, and the starting point was to really say, actually, dentistry in the UK is uniquely positioned as a first world country where the general perception of people's teeth is very poor, and the perception of the way that dentistry is delivered is actually quite poor, and both those things are changing. So the UK actually has a fantastic standard of dental care.
And what about the royal matchmaker bit then? That's a distinguished contribution to life.
Apparently, I read more about it than I know about it. Yeah. But no, I mean, Will and Kate have been friends for a long time, and to be honest, I don't think this is sort of Jane Austen moment where sort of created this great reunion. But no, it's great that they got back together again, and no, it's incredibly exciting.
They look terrific. And
amazing.
You'd expect them to be happy, but they're very happy, I think.
The smiles on their face tells it all, really.
Thanks for being here today, Sam.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
And good luck in next year's Grand National.
Thank you.
Well, the royal wedding fascination has gone global, and the Americans have been giving the Brits a run for their money in terms of royal frenzy. Apparently 60% of the American population followed the run-up to the wedding, and hundreds of thousands set their alarm clocks early to watch it live, making it a record television viewing event in the US. Outside Buckingham Palace, a media centre was set up, and 8,000 international journalists descended upon London to cover today's events. One British journalist who now hosts his own primetime show on CNN, Piers Morgan Tonight, from New York, that is, returned to London for a week of special coverage. And he's here now. Piers is here now. Welcome.
Thank you today. It's such a pleasure to be here.
And delight to have you with us. And it's interesting that there has been fascination. You're perfectly placed to put your finger on it. In a great ecstasy about this business in America, hasn't there?
Particularly America. I mean, obviously the worldwide audience is huge as well, and there's great interest everywhere. But having been in America the last few months, I've watched this rising tide of almost a frenzy of excitement about this. And I think when you try and analyse why, I think one of the reasons is that the Americans are quite envious of the continuity that a monarchy provides. I think they often get themselves into a position where they have a really popular president. President Clinton would be a great recent example, who does 8 years, appears to be at the top of his game, and then has to leave office, and they lose a great president. And I think that in the case of the Queen, she's been there 60 years now, ruling this country. And when Americans say to me, what's the point of the monarchy? I say, it's almost a comfort blanket for the country. It's a continuity, provides security, and it provides a comfort, particularly in difficult times.
I think you're absolutely right there. I remember at the time of Watergate and so on, people in the States, friends in the States and so on, were really jealous of the Constitution in Britain, where the head of state stays and the Prime Minister can be moved on quite easily. But to remove a president is like interfering with the flag almost.
Absolutely right. And I think the great thing about the current monarch, Queen Elizabeth, is that she's not put a foot wrong now in the entire reign. I mean, you could literally hardly find anything she's done where she's made a mistake. And there aren't many presidents where you could ever say that about.
Yeah.
So I think, again, there's a great respect for the Queen. And the Americans are a very respectful people. And I think they look at our monarchy and they look at our Queen, and they're not envious. They celebrate it. They like it. And they come here in droves. I mean, when there's a huge argument in Britain that always rages when these events come on, are they worth the taxpayers' money that funds a large part of the royal family? Or when you see the hundreds of thousands of tourists that pour in, mainly from America, of course they're worth it.
Absolutely, it's a bargain in terms of dollars or pounds.
I think they make money for us.
Yeah, absolutely, and round the world. And you're right about the Americans too. They're very law-abiding, actually. Americans, people don't realise. I've often been going to give a speech somewhere, and it's a 200-mile drive from the airport, and even if you're in the middle of nowhere with no one else around and no cameras and so on, people stick to the speed limit of 50 or 60.
No, they are. And you know, I've lived there quite a lot now in the last few years and come to really love America and Americans. And it's interesting what's going on. I think there's been a kind of reappraisal now of America. We had all the terrible issues that came after 9/11, when you had Afghanistan, Iraq and so on, where everyone seemed to want to be partaking in anti-Americanism. And I think what you're seeing now is a realignment of this. You're seeing America now, I think that the anti-American sentiment is calming down. I think there's a greater respect for it. I think President Obama has done a very good job internationally. Forget America for a moment. But outside of America, I think there's a great new respect for America and for the way it conducts itself. Look at the Middle East. Very, very different policy in terms of the way that America is behaving now in Libya and places like Egypt, not interfering, not sending ground troops in. And this doesn't go unnoticed.
No. And it's not. Some people, Americans, are disappointed by that, of course, and think he's lost his fire and zeal. But you think it's worked out really well.
I think
with the punters out there in the rest of the world.
I do.
Yeah.
I mean, every country I've been to in the last 2 years has been very pro-Obama as a man, as a leader. It doesn't mean he's doing all the right things in his own country. It doesn't necessarily mean he'll be re-elected. But I can tell you, to have an articulate, smart, young African-American president is no bad thing for a country that, through default, not even through choice really, has had to be the world's police force for a very long time as the only real superpower.
What about doing the show, the new show? And as you said, you've been in America a lot over the last few years, but now you're even there even more time and so on. Were there things that you had to get used to, words that mean something different? I mean, how is it different to you working in America than here?
One of my bosses at CNN last night, I've got a pub just down the road from here, and we were having a few pints of British foaming ale, and he said to me that it's when I interview another Brit, he said often you need a sort of some linguist to come in and translate what the hell's going on. You know, we talk about, hey, you're looking good, you've lost 2 stone in weight. He said,
Yeah.
2 stone? Yeah. What the hell's 2 stone, man? And we talk about going on a route to the palace. Well, a route in Britain, of course, means a punch-up. A fight is a route. If you go and rout somebody, an army routs another army. A route to an American is a path, is a route, as we would call it. But a route to an American is something you plant in a garden. So there are lots of linguistic areas where I sort of trip along and have to be corrected by my American producer.
Yeah, and also bewildering that in England you talk to someone who's a good gardener, you say, he's got green fingers.
Yeah.
But in America, you say he's got a green thumb.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know why.
And actually, what I find about America is there's a big thing about them not understanding sarcasm and irony. It's not true. It depends on which city you're in. Most New Yorkers have a very similar kind of sarcastic humour to the Brits, but in LA, they don't have that at all. And certainly when you go down south, they wouldn't understand traditional British sarcasm. They don't, when we're sort of taking the mickey out of each other, sending each other up, Americans can often be horrified that we're apparently being so rude to each other. And they also take everything that we say very literally. So, for instance, if you said in the wrong part of America, I've got green fingers, they would literally think you had green fingers.
Yes.
And that's where the humour difference comes in. There's a very literal humour in America, which isn't quite so prevalent here.
Yeah, and as we were saying the other night, a word like quite in America means very.
Yeah.
Piers Morgan tonight was quite good.
Yeah.
Well, that's great in America. It means it was very good.
Here it means maybe not so good. Yeah, it's true.
Exactly. So
And football, of course, football, which you and I love. Our idea of football is 11 men with no padding and helmets running up, kicking a circular ball.
Yeah.
Their idea of football is big helmets, big pads, hundreds of players, thousands of spectators, and they have a very strange shaped ball.
That's right. And the guy, defender you just quoted there, Arsenal could do with one of those.
They could.
Big. You asked me when I had a very enjoyable time with you on Piers Morgan tonight, a couple of nights ago, you asked me what was my favourite, most memorable interview or whatever. What's yours so far?
I think I've had two that have really stood out for me since I started at CNN. One was getting Oprah Winfrey to do my first interview, because I think when you're trying to launch a new show, particularly in America, to get someone who is the queen of television there, who's one of the predominant interviewers they've had in the last 25 years, and she not only gave me 2 hours of her time, which was amazing, but she also went out afterwards and really banged the drum for me. And that meant a lot to me. And I found her incredibly gracious and kind with her time in a way I would never have expected Oprah to be, just through lack of time on her part. So that was a big thing for me, and it rated huge and got lots of attention. And you know what it's like. You're launching a new show, you want to make a big bang. And you couldn't make much more of a big bang than I did with Oprah. So that was great. And then I think flying to Israel for the first interview with Prime Minister Netanyahu after the Middle East uprisings. I went there about 3-4 weeks ago, and he hadn't spoken to anybody. And Israel's voice was really fascinating, coming after Tunisia, after Egypt, after Libya, to hear what he had to say about all these uprisings circling Israel made it a really compelling and newsworthy interview. So those two so far for me have been the standouts.
Yeah, I can see that. And your dream is to interview the Queen, you said the other night.
I just think the Queen of England would be the greatest interview imaginable. If you think about 60 years of reign, you think how many presidents and prime ministers...
60 years of reign, that sounds like Manchester.
Yeah, but you think who she's met over the years and kept her counsel with. Every world leader, every head of state, every important person in the world has at some stage probably met the Queen and had a private conversation. Imagine the Queen telling her story. I mean, there would literally not be enough airtime for me to run that interview.
No, well, we did 28 and 3/4 hours of interview.
I reckon you could squeeze a 30 out of the Queen.
I think she's certainly the one person you could do more.
I think that's right.
Great to have you with us.
Thank you so much, David.
Good luck with the show.
No, real pleasure. Thank you.
See you soon.
Thank you.
Piers Morgan there. And in a minute, more on the royal wedding, plus Syria, plus Libya, after this short break.